Okay. Hi, everyone. We're back. And today I am talking with Jim Fisher. Hi, Jim.
Hello, how are you, Sharon?
I'm doing well. Thank you. Happy New Year to you.
Well, not quite Happy New Year, but very close.
Very
Happy,
close. Yeah.
happy to
Yes.
put this past year behind us.
hmm hmm 2021 can only be better, right?
Yep.
And Happy New Year to everyone out there. So, Jim, I would like to read your bio to just to let people know a little bit about why we're speaking today and about
Okay.
you. Okay. Bring it up here. There we go. All right. The first 50 years of Jim Fisher's life were spent obtaining an education, BS in experimental psychology and an MBA in accounting, raising a family with his wife of 41 years and working in a variety of financial capacities in small to medium sized companies. In 2001, Jim began studying esoteric subjects and has sought personal experiences as a means of validating his understanding of the breadth of reality. What began as an interest in near death experiences expanded to include other spiritually transformative subjects. Jim has attended 4 residential programs at the Monroe Institute, participated in numerous programs sponsored by the Ryan Center, spent 2 weeks at an ayahuasca retreat in Peru, and has engaged in multiple holotropic breathwork sessions. He has served as a treasurer for the International Association for Near Death Studies and currently serves on the IONS Finance and Ethics Committees. A chance encounter with a prince from Togo, Africa, in parentheses, was it really chance, has evolved into a joint effort to create a regenerative, organic farming operation in Togo. During his first trip to that country, Jim had an opportunity to see how societal belief in voodoo could be used to benefit the health condition of an individual. After learning about a Consciousness Cafe meetup group in Charlotte, North Carolina, headed by Mark Brooks, Jim formed a similar meetup group in Greensboro, North Carolina. As of this writing, there are over 1,200 members of the two groups. Mark and Jim recognized the latent interest in the subjects they presented and decided to recruit a team of people with similar interests to create a website, www.consciousness-cafe.com. The group encourages others anywhere on their spiritual journey to visit the site and become members. Okay, we have a lot to talk about.
Yep. Yep.
So we'll have to do this more than once for sure. Yeah. So thank you. Thank you. If you could help us a little bit. I mean, I've been to the Monroe Institute, and maybe some people who are watching this don't know what the Monroe Institute is.
Mhm.
Maybe if you could help share information on the Monroe Institute and all the great things that it
Sure.
does. Yeah.
I think you have to start with an understanding of who Robert Monroe was. Um, he's no longer living, but he was engaged in radio production. Um, this is back before television really came to be. Um, so he had some excellent experience with audio engineering. He one night had a spontaneous out of body experience. He had no idea what this was. He woke up and saw himself at the ceiling looking down, and he realized that this object next to him was the light fixture on his ceiling. As he looked down, he saw a man in bed with his wife and thought, who is that man? And it frightened him when he realized it was him. So he thought there was something wrong with him. He came back into his body and woke up, and of course, and he sought some medical and psychological counseling to see if there was something wrong with him. He thought maybe he was dying. Um, well, all the professionals he went to said there doesn't seem to be anything wrong with you. And Robert Monroe, with his kind of logical approach to things, thought, well, I wonder if this is a legitimate experience. If if I can be out of my body, can other people be out of their body? So he started doing some research, and he called a team of people together to explore uh, opportunities to facilitate getting out of body. And they used something called binaural beats. I think you've heard of that, having been at the Monroe Institute. And the binaural beats are basically you put sound in one ear at one vibrational frequency, and another sound in the other ear in a slightly different frequency. The brain doesn't like that dissonance, so it attempts to reconcile it. At least this is the theory behind it. And in that reconciliation process, it allows some people to experience an altered reality. It may sound strange to people who haven't been exposed to this stuff before, but they had a lot of success with it. And the people who were in his Explorer program have written their own books on their experiences. Um, well, as they developed this technique of using binaural beats and having success with it, they started going around to hotels and other cities and exposing other people to this technology, and had a lot of success with it. And ultimately, Robert Monroe decided to set up a facility in Virginia where people could come to residential programs and experience this technology and see if they could have their own out of body and other experiences. So it's been around for quite a while, and it's had a lot of people come through there over the decades. Um, I can't remember how I came across it. I guess I must have read Robert Monroe's books, his first book, and I realized that uh, at the my initial journeys were more intellectual, but when I read about the Monroe Institute, I thought, well, maybe I can go beyond just an intellectual understanding of these things and seek an experience. So it's about a 2.5 hour drive north of here. It's pretty convenient. I registered for their Gateway program, and I've been attended the Gateway program, the MC Squared program, which is one that teaches you how to use energy to accomplish things. We can talk about that in more detail. I went to another program called Higher Self Now. We can talk about that as well. And the last one was a Lifeline program. Um, I would say that I'm very left brain oriented, and my experiences were pretty tame at the Monroe Institute. But I was surrounded by a fantastic people every time I go up there. Interesting experiences and people that you meet, and certainly you become friends with these people in a fairly short period of time in these residential programs. And these people are having some interesting experiences. And when you know somebody, when you become friends with them, and they tell you something about what they experienced, it it has a greater ring of truth to it than if you just hear it, you know, you read about somebody having an experience. It's different when you know somebody and you're there when they have the experience. So I'm a big proponent of people, if you're interested in exploring um, non-physical realms, I like to call it that. I mean, this world around us I call the physical realm, but there's a non-physical realm that I say is, I believe is part of reality. So when I talk about reality, um, I break it into two components: the physical and the non-physical. But I would say it's also quite possible that the physical realm is just one of many. Physicists talk about multiverse theory, and from all my readings, things that I've studied, people sometimes go out of body and go places that don't sound like they're this physical reality, but might be another physical reality. And I also believe the non-physical reality that people visit is this huge, diverse, almost infinitely diverse environment, that when we die, we go to this environment. Um,
Yeah.
but it's not, you have to be careful when you read near-death experiences. Uh, I've read over 2,000 experiences and probably met, I don't know, 50 or 100 people that have had near-death experiences over the last 20 years. And each experience has its own uniqueness to it. And so you have to be careful about drawing broad generalizations when you hear about one or two experiences. So that's kind of a little
Yeah.
background on the Monroe Institute. Now you've been there also, Sharon, right?
I have been there. Yes, I've been there twice.
Mhm.
And I went to the Gateway program as well. And that was quite a while ago. And Yeah, I heard about the Monroe Institute through Robert Monroe's books. I guess this was, I'm going to say, close to 20 years ago when I was going through my quickening. And I read all the books I could find. I was actually having sleep paralysis at the time when I lost my stepfather, and things just started happening very strangely for me. Where, and you know what sleep paralysis is, I'm sure, because
Yeah.
yeah, where you're for those who may not know this, I actually teach a class on out of body experiences and lucid dreaming. And people, when you're asleep and you're in that in between state and you're paralyzed and you can't move and you can't scream and you're awake, but you can't move. And if you don't know what's going on, it's very scary. So I was experiencing that pretty much every night after my stepfather passed. And I just happened to come across something on the internet about the correlation, regarding the correlation between out of body experiences and sleep paralysis. And I didn't really know anything about it. I didn't know anything about out of body experiences then. And it hit me, oh, that's what's going on. And as I read through it, it said something about you can use out of body experiences to communicate or, find and with your loved ones. So and I missed my stepdad and I were very close. So I realized this would be a good way for me to be able to contact him. And so I read every book I could get my hands on, and all the Monroe books were a part of that group of books.
Yeah.
Robert Peterson, William Buellman, and which was the second program I went to in the Monroe Institute was his program. Yeah, and so now that's what I do. When I go to sleep at night, I do my exercises so I can travel out of body consciously. We do it anyway. It's just a matter of doing it consciously. Would you agree?
I would agree. Yeah.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
what you were saying, go ahead.
Lucid dreaming is
Hmm.
not quite the same as an out of body experience, but
Hmm.
the idea of becoming conscious in that dream state and taking charge of what you want to experience.
It's amazing.
Mhm.
There's nothing like it. There's nothing like it. As soon as I'm in that state of know that I can leave my body consciously. I mean, it's pretty much euphoric, and I just start floating and flying. So, and
So
you
you've been
know,
doing this for a while.
hmm
I'm I've read a lot of books on out of body experiences. There's one name you didn't mention, Jürgen Ziwe.
oh, I love his books.
You
Yes.
know, you read those books; these are very experienced out of body travelers.
Hmm.
And if you agree that these are legitimate experiences, these aren't hallucinations.
Right.
There are things that you can do to verify that these are legitimate experiences taking you to real places.
Right.
Um, so as I read these things, it's fascinating to me. I think near-death experiences tend to um, they don't you don't have the same breadth of travel opportunities in a near-death experience that you have an out-of-body experience.
Yeah.
So I tend to enjoy reading the out-of-body experience books because I think they, for me anyway, they give me a little greater insight into the breadth of what can be experienced when we finally transition.
Yeah, and that's what I loved about Jürgen Ziwe's most recent book. And I forget the name of it, but I love the subtitle is "How to Enjoy Life When You're Dead."
Hmm. Yeah.
I read it twice, and it's amazing. I don't remember the title, but I know he's got Multidimensional Man, and then Infinite Vistas. I think it's called Vistas of Infinity. That's it.
Yeah.
Vistas
Yeah.
of Infinity. Yeah, and it's amazing the experiences I've journaled probably over 800 out of body experiences in the last 20 years.
That's
And
pretty impressive.
it's because and I know if I can do it, then anybody can do it. It's just something that my mind is programmed to have those, to be conscious during my night travels. And that's all
So
we have
here's
to do.
so here's a point that I'd like to make to
Hmm.
viewers. If you haven't been exposed to these subjects, if you rely solely on what our Abrahamic religions teach us, there's not much in our religious training to give us insight into what awaits us. So most people, when they die, um, they basically are going into this extension of consciousness, which is what it is. You just don't have a body, without any awareness of what they can experience. So I have this simile I use. Suppose you won a raffle, and that raffle is an all expense paid trip to Paris, France. It's exciting. You win this and you're looking forward to the date. But if you won that raffle, wouldn't you spend some time before you left planning what you wanted to experience? You know, what do you want to see? What does Paris have to offer? So that when you got there, you'd have something in mind that you'd want to be doing. And I kind of I think that ultimately, when we pass from this physical reality, if you spend a little time studying these subjects, you might be able to influence what you experience on the other side.
I
So,
totally agree. I totally agree with you. As long as you're conscious, and I tell people all the time, and we're not in the Western world. We're not taught how to die.
yeah.
We don't. We're all. Most people are afraid of death, and that's what we're dealing with right now. And
Hmm.
so we're because we're afraid of the unknown. We don't know what happens, right? And so I would imagine with you working with near death experiencers, that might be, I know with me, that's one of my goals why I came back or was told to come back. And the second one is to help people realize that we don't die.
Hmm.
It's just a change of form.
Yes.
Yeah.
So if you read near death, and you can maybe you can talk about this as well. All these near death experiences that I've read, if you think of how the individuals are thinking as they go through this, it's as if their mind is just continuing along. Like you have a cardiac arrest and you come out of your body and you see them doing CPR on you. What they're saying, when they describe their experience, they say, I looked down and I could see them working on my body, and I tried to tell them I'm okay. If you think about how they're thinking, it's just as if consciousness has just continued on. I'm gonna make another point on this. One of the programs I went to at the Monroe Institute was Lifeline. And what you try to do in Lifeline is get into an altered state of mind and find people who have died, who don't realize they've died. And you try to help them make a final transition. Now, that might sound really strange to a lot of people, but I've met many people who do this kind of work. And I'm going to share a little story about one individual in particular. Vaughn Boone was a very renowned healer in Western North Carolina. Um, some of your listeners, if you're from this area, you may have heard of him. But in any event, Vaughn once told me about his work doing soul rescue work. And he said he gets together with a group of people when tragedies happen and they try to help people make their transition. I said, well, when you say tragedies, what do you mean? He said, well, for example, the World Trade Center collapse, the Oklahoma City bombing. And I said, oh, okay. And he said, it's interesting. The number of people who needed assistance at the Oklahoma City bombing was much more than the number of people who needed assistance at the World Trade Center. And I said, well, Vaughn, why do you suppose that is? And he said, well, he doesn't know for sure, but he thinks that the people at the World Trade Center, for the most part, they knew they were going to die. If you jump out of an 80-story high floor, you're not going to survive that fall. If you're in the building and it starts collapsing around you, you have a second or two to realize, that things are not going to end well. And when you leave your body, you probably have a pretty good idea you've died. Contrast that with the Oklahoma City bombing. You're walking into the office building, maybe dropping a child off at the daycare center there, and boom, you're blown to smithereens. Well, if your consciousness just continues on, right after the boom, you're kind of looking around and thinking, what the heck happened? Look at this devastation. You don't realize that the devastation that happened also blew your body apart. You're still thinking like you normally would. So he said, in helping the people at the Oklahoma City bombing site, uh, he figured that there were a lot of people who just didn't realize they died, and that's why there were so many more that needed help.
Yes, I'm so glad you brought that up. That's part of the work I do as well. And I don't know how to express how gratifying it is, because I actually record my sessions when I do group or do any kind of soul retrievals or soul rescue, spirit rescue is what I call it. And I have a group where we actually, we also rescue animals like slaughterhouses and things like that.
Mhm.
And I can hear, because I'm a paranormal investigator as well, so I work with EVPs. I can hear voices during these rescues saying things like help me, cold, it's cold. And then just lost, those types of things. And then when you help them cross over, move into the light during the session, then you hear their voices thanking you, saying things like warm, uh, God, heaven, uh, peace, all these types of really emotional responses that you can't help. I mean, nobody can tell me it's not true
Yeah.
when I hear it on these recordings. And I'm so happy to hear that other people are doing this, because I don't know anyone personally except for people that I've worked with on my own, that are actually doing this. So I'm really happy to hear that. Thank you for sharing that.
Well, you should attend the Lifeline program. The one I
Yeah,
went to was televised, recorded for a television program.
I saw that one.
It,
Hmm.
just a brief summary of it. One of
Hmm.
the participants, Natalie Sudman, um, in her altered state, met a man, and he explained that he had been fighting in a Civil War battle. He didn't know he had died in that battle. He shared with her what his name was and that he'd fought in this battle. And when we came out of this session, she shared that information that she obtained, and the Monroe Institute turned that over to researcher. And he went around to various places, libraries, Civil War memorabilia, and he found a diary of a soldier who had fought in that particular war, that battle. And in that diary was a reference to his friend who had died, and that friend's name was the name that Natalie had gotten in her out of body or altered state. So to me, when you know people who do this kind of work, you and I are talking for the first time. I I talked about Vaughn Boone. There's another woman, Holly. Can't remember Holly's last name, but people do this kind of work, and it's very rewarding. If your service, if you believe, if you like helping other people, you know, what a tremendous feeling to help somebody make a final transition.
It's immense when you think about it. I mean, look at look at all the people that might be stuck. It's the only word I can think of. Or just like you say, consciousness continues when we leave the body. And I knew that when I had my near death experiences. I'm just okay. Well, my body's laying in the road. Okay, all right. Well, I've done this many, many, many times before. I know what the deal is. And then I just got kind of bored and just turned around. Just turned around, and that's when I saw my dad and saw everything where everything happened.
Mhm.
But yeah, it's just like, okay, well, I know, I know. But if there's a lot of people like you say that don't remember how to cross over, or that are stuck in that life. And I see a lot of people like this in my out of body experiences, because I help people in that too. I saw one man sitting at his desk working, and he was so stressed, so stressed. And I said, hey, what are you doing? And he said, well, I gotta, I gotta do this. I gotta make money. I gotta take care of my family. I gotta do this, and it's intuitive. It's telepathic. I said,
Right.
I think you died. Yeah, you died. So I knew this in that experience. And at first he didn't want to look at me. He says, leave me alone, leave me alone. And then I said, no, look at me. And then he looked at me, and then it's when it hit him that, oh, okay. He had to, but he was so focused
Yeah.
on what he had to do in this life And it was, there's, like you said, there's so many people that don't know, don't want to accept, or don't want to be judged. They're afraid, don't want to be judged by, a guy that judges, that kind of thing. I've come across a lot of people like that too.
Mhm.
And also people that are being held in the astral plane.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, it's it goes back to the point we were chatting about earlier that
yeah.
it behooves us all to understand that the frame of mind that we take into a death is very important. Um, I remember reading in a book called The Handbook of Near Death Experiences, which was a summation of 30 odd years of research into near death experiences by a number of academics. And when you look at what people experience in different cultures, my recollection is that the culture influences what you experience. So if you come from a Christian background, you might experience Christian aspects. You might meet Jesus. If you're not Christian, you're probably not likely going to meet Jesus. Um, so the other side is also pretty malleable. The reality you experience, you can influence the reality. It's not just thrust upon you. You can influence that reality much easier than we can here, and we can talk about that in a minute. But so I remember Jurgen visiting his mother, and in his initial visits with her, she was still this decrepit older woman. And then one time he came across her, and she was a young, vibrant 20-something-year-old woman. And he asked her, and about this, and she had learned that she didn't have to live with the body image that she carried over with her when she died. So she chose to have something else to experience. And I just, the more we understand that, think of how much the depth of experience that you can have once you transition if you know about these things and you can apply them.
Yeah, totally. I mean, the more we know here, the more we know there, and vice versa, right? Yeah, it's
Mhm.
just moving up the spectrum. And when you were talking about the physical reality and non-physical reality, I've found that when I'm in an out of body experience and I'm experiencing the non-physical reality, it's more physical than here.
Yeah, yeah,
It does. It feels more real than
yeah,
here. Isn't that
yeah.
crazy? Yeah. So.
Yeah, it's somebody was I was talking to somebody in our consciousness cafe
Mhm.
meetup, and she'd had an out of body experience or two, I think, and yet she couldn't wrap her mind around the fact that you can have physical contact in this other environment. How can you do that? You're not a physical being. Well, I don't know how you can do it, but people talk about it, and I think there's merit to it.
Yes, yeah, it's definitely feels physical. So and I agree, it's all in our mind. Everything that's happening is in our mind anyway.
Hmm.
So yeah. So let's talk about IONS. That's the near death experience group. Is that what that is? Okay.
International Association for Near Death Studies.
Okay.
I
Okay.
think they're coming up on their 40th anniversary.
Yeah.
Um, this was an organization that was founded by a small group of university professors who were interested. This is shortly after Raymond Moody had written his book in the mid 70s about life after life. And that was, by the way, that book is kind of what got me started. I was looking for something beyond what my Christian upbringing had taught. And when I read that book, I thought maybe this is where it's at. Maybe I should focus on these near-death experiences. So this organization, when after Raymond Moody put his book out, these were inquisitive people. They didn't reject the possibility of this being a legitimate thing to study, and they formed this group and supported one another, and Then it evolved into providing support for people who have near-death experiences. It's a difficult thing for a lot of people, perhaps the majority of people, who don't know what a near-death experience is, and all of a sudden you have one. You don't know what it is. You don't know who to talk to. So the IANS people have set up chapters around the world that can help people assimilate what they've experienced. That typically these are so life-changing that um, you may find that your relationship with loved ones is stressed because they don't accept the reality of what you've experienced. Um, and you can't deny that it's real. You had that experience. And for the loved ones to say, no, it's all a figment of your imagination, that's a terrible situation to be in. And if you don't know where to turn to get help, you know, it's psychologically a very stressful thing. So there, IANS is one place to turn to, but I would also say um, some near-death experiences are distasteful, even frightening. Um, most people who write about these things and talk about it are people who've had positive experiences. They're excited. They've, wow, look at what this means. I need to share this. I feel compelled to help people understand their real nature. But if you've had a negative experience, um, you I think Nancy Bush wrote a book on this. You tend to want to keep that to yourself. You don't want to expose. Why did I have this hellish experience? Is there something wrong with me? Um, so there is an organization, ACISTE, Assist. It's an acronym. If you have a challenging spiritually transformative experience or near-death experience, and you want to talk to a professional counselor who understands these things, not just talk to a group of peers, but talk to a professional counselor, that's another place to turn to.
Oh, wow, that's interesting. I didn't know that about that group. I know, didn't the doctor, was it Eben Alexander? Didn't he have a negative experience at first?
Yeah, I guess you
Eh,
could say that. He existed in like a pool of mud,
Okay.
and he was trying to work his way out of it. He didn't want to be in that mud, and he explains in his book he was able to rise out of that and then experience this beautiful environment with sitting on the back of on the wing of a butterfly.
Yeah. Yeah. That's funny about mud. After my mother passed and I was traveling, I traveled to Venus and found her on Venus. And my mother, she was challenged. I mean, it was a hard life for her. And so I asked her, "Hey, Mom, so do you like Venus better than Earth?" And she said, "Yes." She said, "Being on Earth is like being stuck in the mud."
Okay. Yeah.
So it made me think of that. So
Yeah.
Jim, yeah, I
I
mean,
was going to make a comment. This little side thing.
mhm.
You know what SETI is? Search
E-
for Extraterrestrial
yes.
Intelligence.
Hmm.
To me, it's kind of comical because the underlying assumption is that the path that human civilization has been on is, and the technology that we use is how more advanced civilizations elsewhere in the universe would use the same thing.
Hmm.
But if we know that you can go out of body, and we haven't talked about deceased people materializing, we could talk a little bit about that if you want, maybe at another time. But you know, why would you try to get in a spaceship and travel, through light years of time to get somewhere when you can just project your mind there and be present? Um,
Exactly. Yeah, that's my mode of travel.
yeah.
Totally. Yeah. So yeah, let's talk a little bit about what you wanted to talk about, or what you mentioned earlier about changing reality. The program you took at the Monroe
Yeah.
Institute. Yeah.
Yeah. I use the word malleable. reality is malleable. And I'll start by saying that um, world religions accept this, that you can pray for someone and you can have an influence on, if somebody, a loved one is sick, at least our Christian faith says, pray to God and pray for their well-being. And we believe that we can influence an outcome. So I would say that's an aspect of a malleable reality, that if we believe that prayer, and there is evidence that shows this, but for example, at the Monroe Institute in the MC Squared program, one of the exercises you do is we each take a group of, I think they're barley seedlings, and you um, give them light, and they're going to germinate over a space of a few days. There's a control group of barley seedlings that are not given to people. So you take your seedlings and you give them attention and you give them love. And then at the end of 3 days, we come back and compare the germination rate of the seedlings that we each had that got the love with the seedlings that didn't get the love. And there's a remarkable difference. The seedlings that got the love are much further along in their growth than the seedlings that didn't get it. Um, I'll
That's
quickly
amazing.
talk. So another thing that I've done, I might have one here. Can you? So we're talking about malleable reality, and we first talked about how prayer can influence things. Um, but I would say the notion of prayer, we the normal thinking on that is that we're praying to God to intercede. That we don't understand that maybe the healing is coming through us. That we're instruments. We're not just, passive people asking God to get involved. It may be that our emotional state is an important component of that. So I started talking about this spoon, and if you can see, if I need to hold it closer to the.
No, I can see it. Yeah.
Okay. You
Yeah.
see that bend in the spoon?
Uh-huh.
You know, I observed this during a spoon bending exercise at the Rhine Center, but it's part of the program at the Monroe Institute. The Rhine Center is located in Durham, North Carolina. And before the virus hit, they would have these quarterly, what they called psi parties. The Rhine Center's done a lot of research over decades into human capacity for psychic skills. I'll just kind of leave it at that. So at these psi parties, one of the things that they do is they have at the end of the party, it's a spoon bending exercise. And everybody gets back into a room and a leader explains that you have to know how to do it. You have to know that you can do it. You have to believe that you can do it. And then they pass this bowl of spoons around and everybody takes one out. And he then leads us. He said, I want you to imagine collecting energy in your head, sending it down your arm, through your hand, and into the spoon. And then on the count of, we're going to demand that the spoon bend. And we're then going to touch the top of the spoon to see if we can get it to, is it softened? Can it bend? So each of us takes a spoon out and we're sitting there holding our spoon up, and the guy says, all right, I want you to collect the energy now. So we're thinking about collecting energy in the head. Now send it down your arm and in through your hand and into the spoon. So we're all sitting there doing this simultaneously. And then he says, all right, now command the spoon to bend. And everybody says, bend, bend, bend. And then you briefly take your mind off a spoon, but then you bring it back and you press on the top of the spoon. And I didn't have any success, but I saw a couple people who did. And what happens is when you see somebody else being successful at it, it, I think, imprints on your mind that yes, it can be done. So we go through the same exercise a second time. And now the first two people who were able to do it, they've got the feeling. They know what it feels like to be successful, and they can do it over and over again. But somebody else now does it, and they have success. And it's like you're catching a virus. And I've seen as many as maybe 30% of the people in the room have success with this. Um, so it's a, the idea that we can influence our reality. How can you bend a spoon with mental energy? Or I don't know what, actually, I don't
Yeah,
know what kind of energy it is. All I can say, I don't know how it works, but it works.
it works. Yeah, it's
Um,
amazing what we can do with our mind. And I I thought I had to sneeze there for a second. Okay. So I know I hold spoon bending classes, and I would say that I'm going to say we have a bigger success rate than 30%.
yeah,
And so I have a whole bag of spoons and forks and knives that we bend, that people bend when we're, that group energy is just so amazing. When you see someone bending a utensil, doesn't have to be a spoon, then people start catching on, like you said, like a virus.
yeah.
And they're bending like crazy. And it's just, it feels so empowering to know that it shows us how powerful we are, how the mind is. Yeah,
So
how
let me
powerful the
pose a
mind is.
question
Yeah.
to you.
Mhm.
When you do these sessions with people, do you do it in the same place?
No, I was doing, yes, normally, but I have done them in a couple other places as well. Yeah.
So do you find there's any difference in the success rate depending on where you do it?
No.
Okay.
No.
The reason I asked that is that I read a study. Um, I can't remember the specifics. It may have been some human brain cells, or it might have been red blood cells. But in any event, the researchers wanted to see if uh, different healing techniques could affect the health of these human cells. And I don't remember all the controls they set up, but um, they had a control group that wasn't part of, they weren't receiving the energy from people. And then the experimental group that was getting, some of them were Christian prayer, some of it was Reiki, some of it could have been, the Johari from Japan, different
Mhm.
healing modalities. And what was interesting, one of the interesting things was that of course, the big finding was that there was a statistical. They showed that there was a statistical significant difference in the cells that were getting the love and energy than the ones that weren't. But
Mhm.
another thing that they noticed was that in these healing sessions were multiple sessions over a period of time, and the cells initially didn't react. There wasn't if you only looked at the initial period of time, there wasn't a statistical difference. But over time, these cells reacted more and more, and they surmised that one possible explanation is that the space that these cells were the experimental cells were being held in and getting the energy, the space itself was getting conditioned. That the healing energy was not just affecting those cells, but maybe affecting the environment that those cells were in.
That's fascinating.
So that's
Wow.
why I asked the question. You might pay a little closer
Mhm.
attention to that. In my experience, one of the sessions, spoon bending sessions with the Rhine, was done. Most of them were done in their library, a very
Mhm.
small, contained, intimate setting.
Mhm.
But they had a fundraising dinner or something, as I recall, in the hotel across the street, and we were in a big meeting room and spread out more. And the success rate there wasn't as high as it was in the library sessions.
Oh wow. Yeah, where I was doing them, they were in a healing center, so there's already that kind of energy
Yeah,
going on
yeah.
anyway. Yeah, so which could be why we had such great success rate. I don't know, but yeah, it's
So I'm going to put a little plug in here for a friend of mine, Jose
sure,
Hernandez,
sure.
had a near-death experience, And in his experience on the other side, he was bathed in this beautiful light. Not just, there were colors actually. And
Mhm.
he brought this recollection back with him and was able to digitally recreate what it looked like. And now he's working with a couple hospitals. What they want to do is a study. Um, they want to take some patients and expose them to his artwork and compare their outcomes with patients who aren't exposed to his artwork.
Oh, wow.
And the hope is, the theory that they're testing is, um, can the hospitals create an environment with Jose's art that can have a positive influence on people's health outcomes at the hospital? Does their blood pressure drop? Do they experience less stress? How long is their recovery time? I don't know much more. I think it's just getting started, but it's an interesting concept.
I love that. Jose Hernandez, you said?
Yeah, and a little side thing on that as well. Have you heard of the book Surviving Death?
Who wrote it?
Leslie Keene.
No, I don't know that one.
Um, Leslie is an investigative reporter, and she took that skill set into exploring the concept of, does consciousness survive death? And she wrote this book on it. Well, um, another woman, Kimberly Clark Sharp, got together with Leslie, and they approached Netflix. And Netflix put I believe it's a six series program together.
Oh,
The
great.
first episode is going to air on the 6th of January, just
Nice.
around the corner. So if you happen to have a Netflix account,
Hmm.
um, Jose will be one of the people appearing on that first segment.
Oh, okay. I'm so happy to hear that all this stuff is getting into the mainstream.
Yeah, that's a whole nother subject, the notion of awakening. Um,
Yeah, the awakening.
you
That's
know,
I know that's a whole day's worth of topic or
yeah.
talk on that. Yeah.
So you mentioned our website earlier, and I
Mhm.
put another plug in for that.
Sure.
It's
I'll have it all
conscious.
down on there. I'll have it down
Okay.
below. Yeah, but go
For
ahead.
people, for if you're looking for information on these subjects and others we haven't talked about, that's we've attempted to put a website together. It doesn't cost anything. We're about servicing people who want to get on a journey or who are on a journey. It's just a great place to get information, to find groups that you can connect with.
Nice. That's what we all need, isn't it?
Yep.
Yeah, totally.
I think, the
So,
more people I find, here's another thing. I find I talk to people, I get on a plane or something, and I don't know, it's not something that's a planned thing, but I often get in a conversation with someone, and I bring up something that's related to spirituality, and I gauge whether or not they have an interest in talking about some of these things we're talking about. And I would say maybe 40% of the time there's an interest there. And among those 40%, I would say maybe a third to a half of them have had an experience of their own that they haven't shared with someone because our culture doesn't value these things. They don't want to be thought of as being, something wrong with me. I'll give you an example. This is a really uplifting experience I had about a year and a half ago. I was out in California visiting my son and his family, and I took my 3-year-old grandson to a playground. And while we were there weren't any other kids there at first. And while we were there, a woman came in with her granddaughter, and she sat about 20 feet or so away from me, and I kind of waved and hello, and then I just started a little conversation. I said, "Is this your granddaughter?" And she said, "Yes, it is." And we talked a little bit about families and did she live in the area? And I said, "Is your son living here and working here?" And she said, "No, my son died in Afghanistan recently." And of course, the reaction is, "Oh, I'm so sorry." You offer. And we talked a little bit about what he was doing in Afghanistan, and then I felt like, well, let me ask her a question. have you ever felt as if your son has reached out to you to communicate with you? And her face lit up and the smile. I'm going to get emotional talking about this, but her, it, she was, she said, yes, he did come to me. And she explained, I won't go into the details, but she explained how she felt he had come to her. And we talked about that. And I said, you should read a book called Hello from Heaven. This happens all the time, and we just don't talk about it. And if we could only be comfortable talking about these things, then we'd be aware that we're so much more, and this the veil between here and there is so sheer. Well, after we got done talking, I had to leave after about 20 minutes of conversation, and she took a black rubber arm wristband off her wrist and gave it to me and said, "Thank you so much." And I looked at it, it had the name of her son engraved on it. And just to have had a chance to talk to somebody who could appreciate her experience, and encourage her to, to explore that. Don't just let it go. You know, take, your son's trying to reach out to you. There may be other ways that he can reach out to you.
Wow, that's beautiful. I love that. Wow. Yeah. Being a psychic medium, I know
Yeah,
how healing it is.
yeah.
Yeah, I would. And
That's such a
people
gift.
would.
I
You
love
just did
hearing the
that.
stories that people like you have.
Well, also, I think that people like you. I'm so happy that you asked for that because I believe, and I know from my work and in my personal experiences as well, because we've all lost people, right?
Mhm.
That they're always trying to tell us that they're good. They're trying some way to let us know that they're still here and they haven't died and that they're still living and they're still a part of our family and still know what's going on. And so I'm so happy that she acknowledged that because a lot of times people don't, they don't trust it and they
Yeah,
think, oh well, I guess I'm just imagining it, I just want it to happen. But yeah, that message you gave her was beautiful, that the more you acknowledge it, I believe what I've experienced is the easier it is for them to give you
yes,
more messages.
yeah. I
Yeah.
had a, I respect the work that people like you do. You have a gift, and sharing that with other people is important. I had a mother-in-law that I was close to who was very active in her Methodist church, but she was getting near the end of her life, and one time she came up and lived with us for several weeks. And I was still working at the time. I'd get up in the morning and I'd prepare her a breakfast. And when I had my breakfast, and I'd come home at lunch and prepare her a lunch, and we'd chat. And one day I felt, well, I knew she was getting near the end. And I thought, Mom, how do you feel about death? Are you afraid of it? And she said, well, yes, I am. I said, I've been studying this subject for a long time, and I'm convinced it's nothing to be afraid of. Uh, well, Jim, I hear what you're saying, but I'm still afraid of death. Well, it was a few weeks later that she actually passed, and I can't remember how long after it, but I had a psychic reading with somebody. Somebody went to a psychic, and my mother-in-law came through, and the message that she had was, "I now understand what you were saying." So she couldn't accept it while she was here in this physical reality. But once she got over there, and the fact that I had maybe primed the pump a little bit and placed some thoughts so that when she got over there, hey, maybe there's something to this after all. So,
Beautiful.
you know, seek out psychics. This is legitimate stuff, folks. Um, you can reach out to loved ones. Not all psychics are as skilled as others, and there are some people that probably are frauds out there. But ask friends for references. You may find that you can get somebody that has some wonderful skills, and it's so meaningful to have that
Yeah.
communication.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. Another beautiful story. It's my goal actually, Jim, to help everyone know that they can do this on their own. We all have the ability to do this on our own, right? I mean, you did it at the airport. It was at the airport, right? With that first lady that you talked about. And so it's my goal for, because to teach people,
Yeah,
help people realize that they can, that we have the ability, we all have the ability to be able to connect to the other side. It takes discipline, and it takes some work, and it takes trusting it, trusting what we get. So my goal is for everyone to put me out of business.
yeah. Well, and look at your dreams. We
Oh, totally.
our culture thinks of dreams as just being something that
Hmm.
our resting brain is randomly producing. Well, I don't think that's necessarily the case. And I have a deceased, my brother died, I don't know, 30 years ago. Um, and I've had some wonderful dreams. We were both skiing enthusiasts. We both worked out in Utah at different times, learning and just reveling in deep powder skiing. Um, so I'll quickly diverge to another thing. We can talk about this in more detail, but holotropic breath work is a means of getting into an altered state of being. And I had one session where I set an intention of experiencing some portion of the love that near death experiencers say they experienced on the other side. So I went through my heavy breathing and I got into the state, and I was just luxuriating in this state of mind. And then I remembered the objective I set, and I felt this love. Just kind of, it was a presence. It wasn't a being. I mean, it wasn't something I could see, but I sensed this loving presence in the room, and this loving presence started um, directing love toward me, and it grew and grew and grew to the point where I was weeping in ecstasy, um, just lying on this mat, this huge grin on my face with tears streaming down from my eyes. um, and then I realized that love is for everybody. It's not just me, it's for everybody. And the things that I'm not proud of that I've done in my life, they're inconsequential when you're in this love, you know. So I sensed my deceased grandparents and my father and my brother's presence came and joined this experience, and I was just in bliss. And I said to my brother, I couldn't see him. I just knew he was there. And I said, gee, while you're here, isn't there something we can do together? And the next thing I know, I'm following him down this deep powder run. And I can't see him, but he's kicking up these clouds of powdery snow. And we're making these figure eight turns and creating this beautiful pattern. And I'm just laughing and having this great time. Um, and I really believe that he came and this was an experience we had together. It's you can do this stuff. If you open up to it, if
Right.
you start studying this stuff and accept the reality that these things are real, imagine what you can do with your life.
Right. Yeah, I love that. I love that.
And
That's
then people like you're facilitating. I mean, I get a chance to talk about this stuff, and maybe I help people intellectually understand it. But you look at your work, you're more hands-on. You're helping people in a more direct way.
Yeah, and thank you for saying that. And I feel really, really blessed to be able to do what I love,
Mhm.
and you know, following the path that was laid out for me. And because I come from an accounting background, for God's
Uh,
sake, you know what I mean?
Accounting. I'm a
Accounting.
CPA.
Yeah. Oh, are you? Okay. Funny. Yeah. So I'm used to working in the left brain most of my life, though I've
Yeah.
always been kind of a, kind of, I don't know, artistic, poetry and things like that, but a little bit of Pollyanna kind of thing. But um, to be able to see how what you are meant to do, how it helps people and helps me, helps us. You know, I feel that once you're doing what you were meant to do on the planet, then you grow as well. You can only help but grow yourself. You can't help but grow yourself as well.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Well, I don't know how, we could talk. I've got plenty of
I
subjects we could talk about.
Yeah. Well, let's stop there, stop point, and then we'll get together again and do another recording for everyone out there that I'm sure is totally fascinated with all this.
It's going to be great.
Okay. Well,
That
thank
was
you,
fun.
Jim.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Yeah, thank you. And don't go anywhere. I'll just stop the recording. And thank you everyone for being here. And again, Happy New Year to you. And we'll see you in 2021.